Today, the world around you seems normal. The sun rises, the seasons change, and life goes on as usual. But there was a time in Earth's history when the world froze completely, twice. Not in some distant, fictional past, but in a real, terrifying event that nearly wiped out everything. Imagine a planet where ice sheets stretch from pole to pole, where entire ecosystems collapse, and the air turns bitterly cold. Species fought for survival, animals and plants disappearing in the freezing wasteland, and humanity, tiny groups of survivors, struggling to hold on in the face of extinction. It wasn't just a small ice age, it was a global freeze, one that covered the planet in layers of ice thick enough to freeze entire oceans. And here's the thing that should make you stop and think. The evidence of these catastrophic freezes is still here today. The ice, the rocks, the fossils, they all tell the story. The Earth has experienced this terrifying freeze before, and it's happening again. Rising cold, shrinking habitats, and a planet that is becoming unrecognizable. If you're watching this in New York, Sydney, or Paris, it's time to pay attention. What you're about to hear will make you see the world around you in a whole new way. Because the ice that nearly ended life as we know it could come back, and we need to understand why. Imagine walking through a forest where the trees are alive with the sound of birds. The ground beneath your feet is soft, and the air is warm. Everything feels perfect, like the world is at peace. That's how Earth seemed for thousands of years, a place where life flourished and the climate remained steady. But what if I told you that the calm you're experiencing is actually the calm before a storm? A storm so massive that it would freeze the entire planet twice. No one could have predicted what was coming, and it would change the course of life on Earth forever. For much of human history, we lived in a world where climate and ecosystems seemed almost constant. Scientists have known for years that Earth has gone through ice ages, massive periods where ice sheets covered entire continents, but they never thought the world would face something this extreme. There was always a belief that ice ages came and went like a season, that they were natural, part of Earth's long history. But what was about to happen wasn't just any ice age. It was something far worse, something we would only discover after it had almost destroyed us. It all started around 2.5 million years ago, when Earth began to tilt just slightly, shifting the planet's orbit in ways no one could see coming. With these changes, the climate started to cool, and Earth fell into the first ice age. This wasn't a single event that happened overnight. It was a gradual process, but the ice began to creep down from the poles. Over time, glaciers grew, and the world started to freeze. But even during the ice ages, the planet would warm up every now and then, and the ice would retreat, allowing life to flourish once again. Humans would come to call this cycle the Ice Age, though at the time, they couldn't have imagined what was about to happen. The first signs that something unusual was happening started to show up in the early human communities, the ones who roamed the earth long before cities or even agriculture existed. As the ice sheets began their slow crawl across the northern hemisphere, humans found themselves adapting to a harsher world. The animals they hunted began to disappear, and the warm woodlands they knew were being replaced by barren tundra. But despite the challenges, life went on. People moved, followed the herds, and learned to adapt to the changing climate. Then, something even stranger began to happen. Around 170,000 years ago, the warming periods that had followed past ice ages stopped coming. Earth was locked in a cold grip, and the warmth that had once brought life back to the planet seemed to be gone. No one understood why. The climate shifted suddenly, and Earth was about to face the worst of it. A change was happening, but not one anyone could foresee. The warming periods weren't returning. The Earth was getting colder, faster. And this wasn't just the next phase of an ice age. This was the beginning of a global freeze, a freeze so powerful it would change everything. But no one had any idea yet that this wasn't just a shift in temperature. This was the beginning of a cataclysmic event that would nearly wipe out every living thing on Earth. What followed would be a story of survival like no other, and it all began with a peaceful Earth that had no idea the storm was coming. Long before the ice began to stretch across the planet, Earth was a place of warmth, lush landscapes, and thriving ecosystems. But this wasn't always the case. The history of ice ages is like a hidden story written into the very fabric of our planet. Imagine a world that was constantly shifting, where ice would advance, retreat, and then return again, each time leaving behind traces of how life had to fight to survive. This wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a cycle that shaped everything we know about life today. Scientists have discovered that Earth has gone through several major ice ages. These weren't small freezes that lasted for a few years. They were massive global events that lasted thousands of years, dramatically changing the planet. The first major ice age happened around 2.4 billion years ago, but it wasn't like the ones we picture in our minds. The ice was so thick it nearly covered the entire planet, leaving Earth in a state known as Snowball Earth. During this time, the oceans froze, and life was forced to adapt to survive under thick layers of ice. But even in these extreme conditions, life found a way to persist. The Earth thawed, and life, though slow at first, began to evolve and diversify once again. Then came the next wave of ice ages, stretching from about 720 million years ago through to today. These periods, known as the Pleistocene epoch, are the ones that truly shaped the development of the species that would eventually walk on two legs. During these ice ages, the world was gripped by cycles of extreme cold and brief periods of warmth. As the ice sheets expanded and retracted, species had to either adapt or die out. This was a time of intense struggle, but it also set the stage for one of the most remarkable evolutions in Earth's history: humans. As the ice ages progressed, so did the development of life. The world was constantly shifting, and species had to keep up or be left behind. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths roamed across lands once lush and warm. Early humans, just beginning to emerge from their evolutionary roots, had to learn how to survive in a world that was constantly changing. They adapted by learning how to use tools, make fire, and hunt for food in ways that had never been done before. Life during this time was harsh, but it pushed life to new heights. Fast forward to about 1.8 million years ago, and the planet began to cool again, setting the stage for the dramatic freezes that would follow. Earth's climate became unpredictable, and life on the planet had to brace itself for what was coming next. The glaciers started creeping across the land, and Earth's surface began to change in ways that no one had ever seen before. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter that would change life on Earth in ways no one could have predicted. As the world prepared for the first major freeze, it was clear that something massive was about to happen. The ice was coming, and with it, a new set of challenges that would force life to adapt or perish. The Earth had been through ice ages before, but this time things were different. What followed would be an epic battle for survival, not just for humans, but for every living creature on Earth. And the events that unfolded would reveal just how fragile life can be when faced with a world turned cold. It starts slowly, like a whisper in the wind, barely noticeable at first. Earth has always experienced changes in its climate, but this one feels different. Scientists have studied it for years, but nothing could truly prepare them for the impact of what was about to happen. The Earth's orbit, ever so slightly tilted, shifts in a way that no one expects, and with it comes a cold snap that will last for thousands of years. At first, it's subtle. The sun rises a little later, and it seems to set a little earlier. Temperatures drop just enough for people to feel an unusual chill in the air. But this isn't just a temporary cold front. This is something far bigger. Something that will slowly but surely change the entire planet. Earth begins to cool, and what started as a gradual shift turns into something catastrophic. The first signs of the coming ice age are seen in the plants and animals. Crops that once flourished in the warm soil begin to wither. The trees that once provided shade and food to early humans begin to lose their leaves as the temperatures dip. This is when the animals start to feel it too. The creatures that once roamed freely in the mild climates are forced to find new places to live. The ones that can't adapt quickly enough begin to disappear, and the ones that survive start migrating southward, searching for the warmth they once knew. As the cold tightens its grip on the northern hemisphere, life begins to change in ways no one could have predicted. Humans, who had been thriving in the temperate zones, are suddenly forced to rethink their way of life. They move with the herds, following the animals that are migrating southward. Food sources dwindle, and humans begin to struggle to find enough to eat. Tools that had worked before become less effective, and new methods of survival have to be invented. But this is just the beginning. The ice, which has only touched the edges of the land, starts to creep its way toward the center of the Earth. Glaciers, massive and unstoppable, begin to cover the land, inching their way southward, freezing everything in their path. Oceans, too, are affected, their waters turning colder, pushing sea life into deeper and more dangerous waters. The Earth begins to look like a different place altogether. As temperatures drop, the landscapes change. What was once a lush forest becomes a frozen tundra. The once thriving ecosystems that sustained life are now in danger of collapsing. Humans have no idea how long this freeze will last, but they know they can't survive on the frozen Earth without changing. Those who remain in the coldest regions face a struggle to stay alive. But even in the face of this growing freeze, humans continue to adapt. They start creating shelters, learning to make fire, and finding new ways to hunt and gather food. The first signs of survival strategies emerge, and humanity begins its fight against the ice. The first freeze has begun, and there's no going back. The Earth is now entering an ice age that will change everything. What once seemed like a peaceful, thriving planet is now locked in a fight for survival. It's no longer just about living, it's about enduring the freezing cold and learning to adapt to a world that is becoming unrecognizable. At first, it was just a whisper of cold, but now it's more like a roar. The ice has begun to spread, slowly at first, like the planet is waking up to something it can't control. Ancient glaciers, some of which have been dormant for millions of years, start to inch forward, their massive weight pushing them across the land. These glaciers are unstoppable forces of nature, and as they move, they leave behind a trail of destruction. The first ice sheets, thick and powerful, begin to blanket the northern hemisphere. They spread over land like an ocean of frozen water, covering forests, plains, and even mountains. As the glaciers advance, they change the landscape forever. What was once fertile land is now buried beneath layers of thick ice, and life that once thrived here begins to struggle. The Earth is growing colder with every passing day, and it's no longer just a shift in temperature, it's a complete transformation of the environment. Human tribes that once lived in harmony with the land are suddenly faced with a terrifying reality. Their homes, which used to be warm and abundant with food, are now overrun by ice. The forests they hunted in are becoming barren. Animals, both big and small, are forced to migrate southward, looking for warmer regions. The tribes that relied on these animals for food are left with very few options. They're pushed to adapt in ways they never imagined. To survive, these human tribes must learn how to work together in ways they never had before. As the ice spreads, the survivors are forced to build new shelters, learn how to keep warm in freezing temperatures, and develop new hunting techniques. The landscape, once a place where humans could easily find food and shelter, is now a hostile, unforgiving world. The ice is encroaching, and there's nowhere to run. Some tribes move further south, following the animals they once hunted. Others head toward the mountains, hoping to find a refuge high above the ice. But even the mountains are no longer safe. The glaciers begin to creep into these highlands, slowly but surely, covering everything in their path. In these harsh conditions, only the most resourceful and determined can survive. The ice doesn't just change the physical world, it changes the very way humans interact with it. They start to use fire more than ever before, not just for warmth, but for cooking food, keeping predators away, and creating light in the long, dark nights. The development of tools becomes crucial. Humans are no longer just surviving. They are evolving in real time, coming up with new ways to fight back against the ice and adapt to the new world they're living in. But the ice is relentless. As it moves south, it continues to swallow everything in its path, leaving only small pockets of life scattered across the planet. The tribes that can't adapt will disappear. Only those who can find new ways to survive, to work together, and to outsmart the ice will have a chance to continue their story. The ice is spreading, and it's only the beginning of a long and brutal struggle for survival. The relentless advance of the glaciers doesn't wait for anyone. As the ice spreads across the land, everything begins to change. The cold, once just a slight chill, now wraps the earth in a frozen grip. Animals are forced to leave their homes, searching for warmer places where they can find food and shelter. But they're not the only ones being driven away. Humans, too, must leave behind everything they've ever known. Entire tribes, once settled and thriving in their homeland, begin the long, difficult journey southward, seeking refuge from the encroaching ice. Families that once lived close together are torn apart. As the ice moves faster, there's no time to wait. Some groups of people head toward the mountains, hoping to find higher ground where the ice won't reach. Others head towards the warmer lands to the south, hoping to outrun the freeze. The journey isn't easy. The land they once called home is now a treacherous, unforgiving wilderness, filled with new dangers. Every step they take is a fight for survival. The change isn't just physical, it's cultural. Tribes that once lived in harmony with the land and with each other now find themselves in competition for the few resources that remain. People who once shared their knowledge of the land now find themselves guarding it, desperate to protect their small scraps of food, their few remaining hunting grounds. Cooperation, once essential for survival, begins to break down as the pressure mounts. The ice is not just killing the land, it's killing their way of life. This migration isn't just about moving to a new place, it's about learning to live in a world that is quickly disappearing. The food sources that once sustained them are becoming scarce. The animals that they hunted for survival are migrating too, leaving behind empty forests and grasslands. In some places, the land is no longer able to support life. The human survivors must find new ways to hunt, new places to gather food, and new technologies to stay warm. Every day is a battle, and with each passing day, the world they knew fades further away. The animals aren't having an easier time of it. As the glaciers push southward, many species struggle to find new habitats. Some animals, like the woolly mammoth, are forced into the harshest conditions, moving into areas that were once too cold to inhabit. Others, like the saber-toothed cat, find themselves chasing prey that's harder to catch as food grows scarce. It's a race for survival, with each species trying to adapt to an ever-changing world. Some will make it, others will vanish without a trace. For humans, survival becomes more than just finding food and shelter. It becomes about finding hope in a world that feels like it's slipping away. The survivors keep moving, walking through endless frozen landscapes, their footprints marking the path of a species that refuses to give up. But the ice keeps coming, and the migration shows no signs of stopping. Families grow smaller, and the distance between loved ones grows wider. In the face of such an unforgiving world, the fight for survival becomes a matter of holding on, no matter the cost. The glaciers are advancing, and the journey southward is just beginning. The world is no longer recognizable. The earth that once teemed with life is now locked in a deep freeze, where ice has claimed nearly every corner of the planet. It's not just the mountains or the far north that are covered anymore. The glaciers, massive and unyielding, stretch across the entire northern hemisphere, swallowing forests, rivers, and plains. The oceans themselves are no longer liquid, but frozen solid, creating vast ice sheets that make travel impossible. What was once a thriving, warm planet has now become an inhospitable wasteland. The ice is everywhere. It creeps across the land, covering everything in its path. What used to be a lush forest is now a barren, icy desert. Where there was once a river, there is now only a solid sheet of ice. The familiar sounds of birds chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, and animals hunting for food are gone. In their place is an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional crack of ice shifting or breaking under the weight of the advancing glaciers. It's as if the world itself has gone to sleep, frozen in time. For the humans still alive, this is the worst moment yet. The small groups of survivors that once roamed freely across vast landscapes now find themselves in a constant battle for survival. The places they once called home are no longer livable. The ground is frozen, the air is frigid, and food is nearly impossible to find. Every day is a struggle to stay alive. In the face of the ice, they have no choice but to keep moving, searching for places where the ice hasn't yet reached, hoping for a miracle. Some survivors head for the mountains, believing that the higher altitudes may provide refuge from the freezing temperatures below. Others travel southward, hoping to find an area that remains ice-free, but no place is safe for long. The glaciers are advancing relentlessly, and even the most remote areas soon feel the cold touch of the ice. The survivors can no longer afford to be picky about where they live. They are forced to adapt in ways they never imagined, finding shelter wherever they can, even if it means living in caves or makeshift huts made from whatever materials they can scavenge. As the earth continues to freeze, the survivors realize that they are not just running from the ice, they are running from extinction. Their world is shrinking, and with it, their chances of survival grow smaller. But in the face of this, something remarkable happens. Humans, known for their ability to adapt, begin to develop new ways to survive. They learn to build better shelters, create warmer clothing, and even find new sources of food. They hunt animals that have managed to survive in the cold, and they begin to rely on each other more than ever before. Cooperation becomes their only hope, but even with all their efforts, survival is never guaranteed. As the ice spreads, the Earth becomes a dangerous place where life struggles to survive. The survivors are up against not just the cold, but the overwhelming power of the glaciers. The ice is vast and relentless, and it seems there's no end in sight. Yet, amid the vast frozen wasteland, these small groups of survivors continue to push forward, determined to find a way to live in a world that no longer seems to want them. Their struggle is far from over, but they hold on to the faint hope that, somewhere out there may still be a place where they can survive. After what feels like an eternity under the grip of the ice, something incredible happens. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the glaciers begin to recede. The Earth, which has been locked in a frozen prison for thousands of years, begins to thaw. It's like the planet is waking up from a long, cold sleep, stretching its arms and shaking off the chill. The sun, which had barely been visible during the endless winters, begins to shine again, and the temperatures rise ever so slightly. For the first time in ages, the survivors feel warmth on their skin. It's a small but hopeful sign, a glimpse of the world that was before the Ice Age began. At first, the thaw is gentle, a slow process that unfolds over hundreds of years. The glaciers, which had once dominated the landscape, begin to shrink. The ice that had covered vast swaths of land begins to melt, trickling into rivers and lakes. The earth starts to breathe again. The land that had been barren and lifeless now begins to show signs of life. New plants push through the soil, reaching for the sun that had been hidden for so long. Flowers bloom, grass grows, and trees start to sprout again. It's a quiet rebirth, the earth slowly recovering from the devastation that once seemed impossible to overcome. For humans, this thaw is a second chance. The survivors, who had once been forced to flee from the ice, now find themselves in a world that is slowly becoming habitable once again. They begin to rebuild, creating new homes in the warmer regions that the glaciers had once claimed. Their lives, which had been a constant struggle to survive, now have a sense of possibility. The harsh cold that had driven them to the edge of extinction has finally begun to lift. But the world that emerges from the thaw is not the same as the one that existed before the Ice Age. The ecosystems that once thrived are forever changed. Some species of animals that had once roamed the earth are now gone, wiped out by the freezing cold. Others, like the woolly mammoth, which had once been a staple of life, have disappeared entirely. In their place, new animals emerge, ones that are better suited to the warmer climate. Some of the survivors of the Ice Age, like the bison and the wild horse, return, but they are not the same as before. The world is different now, and everything in it must adapt to the new conditions. Humans, too, must adapt. They have learned to survive in a harsh world, but now they must learn to thrive in a changing one. They begin to form new societies, develop new tools, and find new ways to live with the environment. The Earth is no longer just a place to survive. It is a place to rebuild, to create, and to live. But even as the thaw brings hope, the survivors know that the world is still fragile. The memories of the Ice Age are fresh in their minds, and they know that the Earth could change again, just as it had before. The first thaw marks a new beginning, but it is also a reminder of the harsh reality that the world is always in flux. The survivors have made it through the worst, but the future remains uncertain. Still, for the first time in a long while, there is hope. The earth is warming, life is returning, and the struggle to survive seems just a little bit easier. The survivors have proven that they can endure, and they are ready to face whatever comes next. Just when it seemed like the earth was beginning to heal, something unexpected happens. The warm temperatures that had brought life back to the planet begin to slip away. At first, no one knows exactly why. The change isn't immediate, but it's undeniable. It starts with a subtle chill in the air, a slight dip in the temperature that no one pays much attention to. But as the weeks pass, the cold begins to creep in, first slowly, then more rapidly. The survivors, who had just begun to rebuild, are now faced with a terrifying reality. The ice is coming back, and it's bringing with it a freeze unlike anything they've ever experienced. Scientists, if there are any left to study such things, are baffled. The last ice age, though devastating, had a clear cause. It was linked to changes in the Earth's orbit, a shift in the way the planet tilted and rotated. But this time, there's no obvious explanation. The warming period had been gradual, so why was it ending so suddenly? Why was the Earth cooling down again? The survivors have no answers, only questions, and fear begins to take root. As the temperatures drop, the land begins to change once more. The rivers, which had begun to thaw, start to freeze again. The green fields that had just been restored are covered with snow once more. Life, which had begun to bloom in the thawed world, now faces the same fate it did during the first freeze. The plants that had started to grow begin to wither, unable to survive the returning cold. The animals that had returned to the land begin to migrate again, desperately searching for warmth, but finding little. Some species are lucky enough to survive the initial cold snap, but others are not so fortunate. The survivors, who had thought they were safe, now find themselves at the mercy of a new ice age. The shelter they had carefully built, the food they had stored, and the hope they had nurtured all seem to be slipping away. The ice is spreading, moving faster than before, and it seems unstoppable. It's as if the Earth has returned to its frozen state, as though the warming period was nothing more than a brief interruption in an endless cycle of cold. For the survivors, this is a nightmare they thought was over. They had learned to adapt to the ice the first time, but this new freeze feels different. The cold is harsher, the ice thicker, and the stakes higher. The small pockets of warmth they had found are quickly disappearing. They must move again, fleeing south once more, but this time there is no guarantee that there is anywhere left to run. The survivors are now faced with an even more brutal world, one that offers no promises, no hope. The struggle for survival has returned, and it's more dangerous than ever. The second freeze has begun, and once again, the survivors are forced to fight for their lives. As the Earth cools, they realize that no matter how hard they try, they are always at the mercy of the planet's unpredictable changes. The ice is not finished with them yet, and the battle to survive is far from over. The future is uncertain, and as the cold returns, all they can do is hope they will be able to find a way to endure, just like they did before. It happens faster than anyone expected. One moment, the survivors are cautiously optimistic, rebuilding their lives in the wake of the thaw. Then, the next moment, the temperature drops again, this time with a force that takes everyone by surprise. The warmth that had only just returned begins to slip away, and a cold front, unlike anything they've experienced before, takes hold. The Earth, it seems, is not done with its transformation. The second ice age is not just a threat now, it's a reality, and it's coming in full force. As the temperatures plummet, the survivors feel the first bite of the cold again. At first, it's a small, nagging chill, a reminder of what they had just escaped. But soon, the chill becomes unbearable. The wind howls through their shelters, and the once mild days become bitterly cold. The world that had begun to warm and come alive is now sinking back into a deep freeze. For every day the survivors spend in the cold, It feels like the Earth itself is trying to erase them from existence. The ice sheets, which had once been retreating, now surge forward once again. The glaciers move faster, more aggressively, and the land that had been thawing is soon covered in a thick layer of snow and ice. The oceans, too, start to freeze again. Rivers that had been flowing freely now slow to a crawl, their waters turning into solid blocks of ice. The landscape, which had just begun to show signs of life, now seems barren, as though nature itself has decided to turn back the clock. The survivors can only watch as the world they had begun to rebuild disappears once more beneath a blanket of ice. The resources that the survivors had so carefully gathered begin to dwindle. Food becomes scarce as the animals they rely on to survive move away, searching for warmer climates that seem farther out of reach with each passing day. Hunting becomes more difficult as prey becomes harder to find, and the survivors struggle to gather enough to eat. The plants that had begun to grow are now frozen in place, unable to survive the harsh return of the ice. What little they had managed to build now feels fragile, like it could all fall apart at any moment. The survivors realize that this new freeze is different. It's colder, it's harsher, and the land is less forgiving than before. The weather becomes more unpredictable, and the atmosphere itself seems to be freezing, making it even harder to breathe. Every day is a fight against the cold, and the survivors know that the stakes are higher this time. There's no longer the hope that the ice will recede again, not with the resources they have left and the brutal cold that continues to intensify. For the first time, the survivors wonder if they will make it through this second ice age. They're faced with an even harsher world, a world that seems determined to erase everything they've worked for. The second freeze has begun, and this time, the fight for survival is not just about finding warmth. It's about finding a way to endure in a world that is rapidly becoming uninhabitable. The ice is not just a wall to get through. It's a force that could wipe out humanity for good. It's hard to tell whether the survivors are still living or merely existing. The world outside is a frozen wasteland. The ice has claimed everything, and what's left seems as if it's hanging by a thread. The temperatures continue to plummet, and every day is a battle to stay warm, stay alive, and stay hopeful. The survivors have retreated to makeshift shelters, crude structures cobbled together from anything they could find, branches, stones, and any remnants of the old world that still have some value. But no matter how hard they try, nothing seems enough to stave off the cold. They build, they try, but the ice still creeps in. In the early days of the freeze, fire was a luxury. Now, it's the only thing standing between them and certain death. Every scrap of wood is worth its weight in gold, and the survivors burn whatever they can get their hands on: branches, animal bones, even the few remaining books and old tools they manage to salvage. The fire becomes the center of their lives, a fragile, flickering light in an otherwise unyielding dark world. But even fire has its limits. It can only do so much when the cold is so severe that it seeps into the bones of everything, living and dead alike. They begin to adapt in ways no one could have imagined. The survivors' knowledge of the land, once their greatest asset, now becomes a matter of life and death. They learn how to build better shelters, ones that can trap warmth more efficiently. They wrap themselves in layers of fur and cloth, using everything they can to insulate themselves from the cold. The old ways of hunting are no longer enough. The animals they once tracked and relied on have either fled or died, and the survivors are forced to use every ounce of creativity they have left to find food. They learn to dig for roots, gather what little plant life remains, and even fish through the ice in search of any living thing they can eat. New technologies emerge out of necessity. People begin to fashion more advanced tools from bone, stone, and metal scraps. What were once simple hunting tools are now used to dig into the frozen earth, to trap whatever animals they can find, and to defend themselves from the wild. The survivors begin to create weapons more specialized for the cold, tools designed to break through the thick ice and hunt creatures that now inhabit the frozen world. The need to survive has pushed humanity to innovate in ways they never thought necessary. But even with these advancements, survival is still a constant struggle. The cold does not relent, and the ice continues to spread. The survivors, their bodies weakened by the harsh conditions, fight to hold on, refusing to let go of the fragile life they have left. But with each passing day, it becomes clearer. They're living on borrowed time. Despite the relentless odds, the survivors are determined not to let this be their end. They fight back, using every ounce of their strength, intelligence, and ingenuity. They work together, pooling their knowledge and resources to face a world that seems bent on wiping them out. It's not a perfect system, and it doesn't always work, but it's all they have. They have come so far, survived so much, and they won't let the ice take everything from them. The last stand has begun, and the fight for survival has never been more desperate. The earth falls silent as the ice sheets advance, pushing everything into an unrelenting darkness. The sun, once a beacon of hope and warmth, is obscured by thick clouds of ash and dust. For months, the skies stay perpetually grey, with no sign of the sunlight that used to nourish the world. The warmth that once allowed life to thrive now feels like a distant memory, and in its place, a long, cold darkness takes hold. The survivors, already pushed to their limits by the freeze, now face the complete collapse of the world they knew. It's as if the earth itself has fallen into a deep, endless night. The days blur together as the sky is swallowed by the thick clouds that block the sun. Without the warmth of the sun, crops that had just begun to grow with the thaw begin to die. Plants, once vibrant and green, wither and turn brown. The survivors try to grow what little food they can, but the lack of sunlight makes it nearly impossible. They dig into the frozen earth, hoping to find something, anything, that can sustain them, but the land is barren. The great darkness has come, and with it a crushing sense of hopelessness. The air, once fresh and clear, is now filled with a thick, suffocating fog. The survivors breathe in the cold, heavy air, their lungs burning with every breath. The darkness feels as if it's pressing in on them, like the weight of the sky itself is pushing down. With no sunlight to guide them, the survivors struggle to keep track of time. The days blend into one another, the long nights stretching on and on. It's hard to tell where one day ends and the next begins. In this endless twilight, survival becomes even more of a struggle. With the sun gone, the survivors' only source of warmth is the fire. They huddle around it, hoping that the flames will keep the darkness at bay. But even fire can only do so much when the cold is this deep and the days this long. It's not just the freezing temperatures they're fighting now, it's the hopelessness that comes with it. The cold no longer feels like an external force. It has seeped into their very bones, and with the darkness surrounding them, it feels like it will never end. The world outside is changing rapidly. The glaciers, now a dominant force in the world, continue their slow but inevitable march forward. The land that was once a safe haven is now covered in ice, and the survivors are pushed to the brink. The animals they rely on for food have either fled or perished, and the ones that remain are too scarce to be hunted effectively. In this dark, frozen world, survival is not just about finding food and warmth. It's about keeping the light alive inside, both literally and metaphorically. For the survivors, it's as if the earth itself is testing them. They've endured the ice, the cold, and the long migration south, but now they face something much worse. The darkness feels eternal, and it's hard to see how they can possibly continue. But in the face of this overwhelming despair, something inside them refuses to break. The great darkness is here, but the survivors will keep fighting, even if it feels like the light will never return. They have no choice but to survive, to hold on, and to hope that somewhere, out there, the sun will rise again. As the cold deepens and the ice tightens its grip on the earth, survival becomes not just a struggle against nature, but a fight against each other. The resources that were once plentiful are now scarce, and every day is a battle to hold on to what little is left. Food, shelter, fire, these are no longer luxuries. They are the difference between life and death. What was once a shared way of life among tribes is now a fractured existence, with groups fighting for their very survival. The first cracks appear when food becomes harder to find. Animals that once roamed freely have either died or fled to warmer areas, leaving only the most desperate survivors behind. The fields that once offered plentiful crops are now buried under thick layers of ice, and the plants that once grew in abundance are nothing but frozen remnants. The survivors, driven by hunger and desperation, begin to compete for the small scraps of food that are left. Hunting parties, once unified in purpose, now break into smaller factions, each group trying to claim territory for themselves. The struggle for food is fierce. What was once a simple hunt for the day's meal is now a life or death battle. Some tribes band together, forming alliances to take on larger prey, but even these alliances are fragile. Trust, once a cornerstone of survival, begins to erode as suspicion and fear grow. The resources are dwindling, and those who are strongest, who can take what they need by force, are the ones who thrive. Shelter, too, becomes a point of contention. What were once shared, communal living spaces are now divided into separate camps, each group trying to protect their territory. Fires that once burned brightly for all to share are now jealously guarded. The warmth they offer is too precious to be given away freely. The small patches of ice, free land, the caves, the remnants of old structures, all become prizes to be claimed. Those who fail to secure shelter are left exposed to the cold, unable to find refuge as the temperature continues to drop. With the world outside so unforgiving, the survivors turn inward. They become more protective, more defensive, more willing to do whatever it takes to survive. What were once small, tight, knit communities are now fractured into hostile factions, each focused solely on their own survival. The sense of unity that once defined humanity in the face of the ice has been replaced with fear and distrust. Every group is on edge, ready to defend what little they have left, and even the slightest disagreement can spark a conflict that may lead to bloodshed. In the coldest, darkest days, humanity's true nature begins to emerge. The desire to survive overrides everything else. Those who were once allies now see each other as threats. The human race, once united by the need to survive against the ice, is now divided by the very resources that are keeping them alive. The struggle to hold on to food, shelter, and warmth has transformed what were once communities into battlegrounds, where survival is a constant fight and alliances are always temporary. In the end, it's not just the cold that threatens them, it's each other. The ice has not only changed the world around humanity, but it has started to shape the humans themselves. As the cold continues to push them to the brink of survival, something extraordinary begins to happen. The pressure of the harsh environment starts to mold humanity in ways no one could have predicted. For thousands of years, humans had lived in relative comfort, but now In the face of the cold, they are forced to evolve. The extreme conditions become a catalyst for change, a test that will push their bodies and minds to adapt or perish. At first, the changes are subtle. The survivors, already hardened by years of struggle, begin to notice that some of their children are born with thicker layers of fat beneath their skin. Others develop slightly shorter limbs, better suited for conserving heat. These physical changes, though small at first, are the first signs of human evolution responding to the Ice Age. The cold, which had once seemed like an unstoppable force, is now shaping the very beings that live in it. As the generations pass, these changes become more pronounced. The survivors, who were best adapted to the cold, are the ones who live on to pass their genes to the next generation. Those with thicker skin, more efficient ways of conserving heat, and shorter bodies are the ones who are able to survive in the freezing world. The long, slender bodies that were once useful for running across warm plains become less practical in the cold, and shorter, stockier frames begin to emerge. These new physical traits are not just adaptations, they are the first signs of evolution happening right before their eyes. But it's not just the body that changes. The human mind is also adapting to the cold. The need to survive in such extreme conditions forces humanity to develop new strategies, new tools, and new ways of thinking. Social structures change as well, with groups becoming more tightly knit, relying on cooperation and communication to overcome the challenges of their environment. The survivors begin to form more organized, complex societies where information is passed down through generations. Knowledge becomes one of the most valuable resources in a world that offers so little. Humans start to develop technologies that help them survive in the extreme cold. They learn how to build better shelters that can keep out the freezing winds and trap warmth inside. Fire, once a luxury, becomes a constant companion, and new ways of hunting, gathering, and preserving food emerge. These innovations, born from necessity, allow humanity to hold on, to keep going, to find ways to live in a world that seems bent on destroying them. Over time, these small adaptations add up. What began as minor changes in body and behavior eventually leads to the evolution of entire populations. The survivors, now adapted to the Ice Age environment, become more capable of thriving in the cold than those who couldn't keep up. What started as a fight for survival becomes a process of natural selection, with those best suited to the cold passing on their traits to the next generation. As the years go by, it becomes clear that humanity is not just enduring the Ice Age, it is evolving in response to it. The Ice Age has left its mark, not only on the Earth, but on the very people who live on it. What was once a world of warmth and abundance has become a world of cold and survival, and humanity's evolution is a testament to the power of adaptation. In the face of the freezing world, the survivors have changed, growing stronger and more resilient with each passing generation. And though the cold may continue to threaten them, humanity's ability to survive is now written into their very genes. After centuries of struggle, the survivors find themselves caught in a moment of uneasy peace. The cold still wraps the earth in its relentless grip, and the ice sheets continue to creep forward, but for the first time in a long while, the survivors have something they haven't had in ages: time. Time to catch their breath, time to rebuild, and time to reconsider the fractured relationships between their once divided tribes. But this peace is fragile, like a thin layer of ice on a lake, and it's only a matter of time before cracks begin to show. In the harsh world where survival was once the only goal, humanity has learned the value of cooperation. What was once a struggle to defend territory and resources has slowly morphed into a more practical approach to staying alive. The survivors realize that in order to hold on to what they have, they need to share knowledge, resources, and sometimes even the warmth of their fires. The tribes that were once isolated, each fighting for their own survival, now begin to form tenuous alliances. They trade with each other, help each other, and begin to rebuild the basics of society. But even as cooperation becomes essential, there is still a tension between unity and isolation. Some groups are reluctant to share what little they have, fearing that giving away too much could leave them vulnerable to the next wave of cold. Others, more trusting and open, see this peace as a sign of hope, a chance to create something greater than just survival. These two mindsets begin to clash. The fear of the ice, of the cold, of the unknown future begins to eat away at the fragile peace. The survivors who are the most isolated see the cooperation of others as a weakness. To them, working with other groups feels like a threat, a risk that could lead to betrayal or exploitation. They argue that relying on others could be the very thing that leads to their downfall. The harsh world has taught them that trust is a luxury, one that can easily be shattered. Their solution is to retreat further into isolation, to hold tight to what they have, no matter the cost. On the other side, there are those who believe that only by working together can humanity overcome the ice that is slowly swallowing their world. These survivors know that the struggle for food, shelter, and warmth is greater than any one tribe can manage alone. They see that their only hope lies in unity, in pooling their resources and strength to stand against the ever-encroaching cold. But even within these groups, doubt lingers. They question whether this peace is just an illusion, one that will crumble under the weight of the first major crisis. The tension is undeniable. Cooperation becomes necessary, but it's a kind of cooperation that is fragile and full of uncertainty. There are always whispers of mistrust, always the fear that the ice is just the beginning of an even greater threat. As the ice continues to spread, the fragile peace between the factions holds. For now, but the survivors know that peace is temporary, that the true test of humanity's strength will come not from surviving the cold, but from surviving each other. The fight for survival isn't over yet, and the ice isn't the only thing that could tear them apart. After what seems like an eternity, something incredible happens. The Earth shifts, ever so slightly, as the planet's tilt changes once again. It's a slow, almost imperceptible shift, but the effects are immediate and dramatic. The ice, which had covered the Earth for so long, begins to recede. The glaciers, which had once seemed unstoppable, start to shrink, pulling back from the lands they had claimed for centuries. The frozen wasteland that had swallowed the planet slowly starts to give way to something new, something alive. For the first time in a long while, the sun breaks through the thick, clouded sky, and the survivors feel its warmth once again. The light feels foreign at first. For so long, the survivors had lived in the constant grey of the ice, with only the faintest hints of daylight cutting through the clouds. The sun, now shining through the cracks in the sky, feels like a dream. It is almost overwhelming, this first glimpse of warmth, and it brings with it the hope that life, which seemed so distant and impossible just a short time ago, might finally return to the earth. The survivors feel the warmth on their skin and are filled with a sense of something they haven't felt in so long, hope. As the ice begins to recede, the land slowly comes back to life. The rivers that had been frozen solid for so long begin to flow again, carving paths through the land that had been buried under ice. Plants, long dormant, begin to grow once again, pushing through the soil, reaching for the sun. The earth is waking up, and with it, humanity begins to rebuild. The survivors, battered and scarred by the long years of the Ice Age, start to emerge from their shelters, cautious but determined. They look around at the land, at the plants and the animals that are slowly returning, and they begin to imagine what life could be like once again. But as the survivors step back into the light, they realize that while the sun has returned, the scars of the Ice Age remain. The land is forever changed. The once thriving ecosystems are now fragmented, and the plants and animals that had once called the Earth home are no longer the same. Some species have disappeared entirely, wiped out by the cold. Others have evolved in response to the harsh environment, forever altered by the years of freezing temperatures. Humanity, too, is different. The generations that have survived the Ice Age have been shaped by it. Their bodies and minds are not the same as those who lived before the freeze. They have adapted, evolved in ways that are impossible to ignore. Rebuilding will not be easy. The survivors know that the ice, though it may have retreated for now, could always return. The Earth is a place of constant change, and the lessons of the Ice Age are fresh in their minds. They begin to work together, knowing that their survival will depend not just on their ability to survive the cold, but on their ability to adapt to the world they now live in. The scars of the past will never fully heal, but the survivors know that the future is theirs to shape. The return of the sun marks the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with possibility, but also a reminder that the Earth is always changing, and survival requires more than just strength. It requires the ability to adapt, to rebuild, and to hope. The ice has finally begun to retreat, and with it comes the promise of new beginnings. For the survivors who have lived through the long, dark years of the Ice Age, the thaw brings more than just warmth. It brings the opportunity to explore new territories, to rediscover the world that once was. What was once a frozen wasteland is now a land of possibilities. The survivors, battered but not broken, begin to move out of their shelters, looking to rebuild and find new places to call home. As the land opens up once again, humans begin to migrate back into areas that had been completely covered by ice for centuries. The once barren landscapes are now being shaped by the returning sunlight, and life begins to take root in places that were once inhospitable. The survivors look at the thawing world with a sense of awe, but also with a measure of caution. They've learned that the Earth is unpredictable, that nothing is ever guaranteed. The warmth of the sun feels almost too good to be true, and the survivors know that they cannot forget the lessons they learned during the Ice Age. Still, the thaw brings with it the hope of something new, something better. As humans venture into these newly accessible territories, they discover a world that has changed in ways they never imagined. The landscapes they once knew are forever altered, shaped by the ice that covered them. The forests they once walked through have been replaced by vast stretches of grasslands and barren plains. The rivers that had been frozen solid for so long now carve through the land, bringing life to the once quiet terrain. But the Earth, though familiar, is no longer the same. The ecosystems have shifted, and the animals that once thrived in the old world have either evolved or disappeared. Despite these changes, there is a sense of optimism as humanity begins to explore these new territories. With each step into the unknown, new opportunities arise. The survivors begin to build once more, creating homes and communities in places that were once inaccessible. As they explore, they find not just new lands, but new ways of life. The knowledge they have gained over the years of survival in the cold is now being put to use in the warmer, more fertile land. They begin to cultivate crops, to tame animals, and to create the foundations of civilizations. What emerges from the ruins of the old world is something different, something shaped by the harsh lessons of the Ice Age, but also driven by the hope of a new future. The survivors, who once fought for every scrap of food and warmth, now begin to build societies that are more connected, more cooperative, and more resilient. They've learned that survival is not just about enduring the harshest conditions, but about adapting to change, finding strength in each other, and looking toward the future with hope. The thaw, while offering the promise of new beginnings, also serves as a reminder that the Earth is always in flux. The survivors know that the world is constantly changing and that the challenges of the past will never fully be gone. But in the face of uncertainty, they press on. The ice may have taken so much from them, but it also gave them something invaluable: the knowledge and resilience to rebuild. As humanity moves forward into this new world, the horizon is wide open, filled with endless possibilities. The Earth has changed, and with it, humanity is changing too. After the long years of struggle, the survivors have finally begun to rebuild, but the world they now live in is far different from the one they once knew. They are no longer a scattered, desperate group trying to survive the ice. They are stronger, more diverse, and united by the lessons of their past. The survivors, shaped by their experiences in the cold, are now determined to create something that will last, something that will stand the test of time. The ice may have taken so much from them, but it also gave them the drive to rebuild, to start anew, and to create a future that would never be so easily erased again. With the land thawed and the sunlight warming the earth once more, humanity begins to grow again. The survivors, who have lived through the darkest days of the Ice Age, are now able to focus on rebuilding their societies. But it's not just about rebuilding homes, it's about rebuilding a way of life. The knowledge passed down through generations of struggle becomes the foundation of new civilizations. The survivors, now more diverse and resilient than ever, begin to come together to form villages, towns, and eventually cities. They learn from the past, knowing that the key to surviving in a world that is still unpredictable lies in cooperation and shared knowledge. Technology, once a distant dream during the long, dark years of the freeze, begins to advance again. The survivors, who had once relied on simple tools to survive, now begin to develop more complex technologies. They rediscover the basics of agriculture, learning to cultivate the land in new ways. They begin to use the knowledge they gained during the cold years to harness the power of the elements, creating more efficient ways to store food, build shelter, and protect themselves from the harsh weather. Fire, once the only source of warmth, is now just one tool in a growing array of technologies that help humanity thrive. But despite their advancements, the survivors remain wary. The ice that once consumed the earth is never far from their minds. They know that the climate, as unpredictable as it is, could change again. The lessons of the Ice Age have left deep scars on the survivors, and they are determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. They build their societies with a sense of caution, aware that the earth is a place of constant change. The survivors may have regained their footing, but they are no longer naive. They are not just rebuilding civilization, they are preparing for whatever might come next. In their search for answers, the survivors turn their gaze to the stars. They look up at the night sky, wondering if the ice will return, if the earth will once again plunge into darkness and cold. They begin to study the heavens, trying to understand the patterns of the world around them, searching for any sign that might give them clues about what the future holds. They are no longer just looking for ways to survive, they are looking for ways to thrive in a world that is always changing. The survivors know that their journey is far from over. The earth may have thawed, but the threat of the ice is still in their minds. As they rebuild their civilizations, They do so with the understanding that the world they live in is fragile and unpredictable. They are stronger now, more resilient, but they also know that the future is never certain. Their gaze remains fixed on the stars, wondering if the ice will return, and preparing for whatever challenges the world may throw at them next. As the survivors continue to rebuild their societies and advance in technology, they begin to look deeper into the past, trying to understand the full scope of the ice ages and the cycles that have shaped their world. They have survived 2 catastrophic freezes, but there's still so much they don't know about the forces that caused these events. Curiosity leads them to search for clues in the remnants of the old world, and what they discover is nothing short of astounding. Deep in the ruins of an ancient civilization, they uncover records that have survived the long years of the ice. These records, stored in the form of fragile scrolls, carvings, and worn tablets, tell stories of a time when the earth was frozen before. The survivors pore over these ancient texts, trying to decipher the language and understand the knowledge left behind. What they find shakes them to their core. These records reveal that the ice ages were not random events, not just part of the natural cycles of the planet. The cycles of freezing and thawing have happened before, and they seem to be tied to something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The survivors are stunned to learn that the Earth has gone through these ice ages in the past, long before the current generation. There are signs that this cycle has occurred many times over the millennia, each time with devastating consequences. The evidence is clear. The ice ages are not anomalies. They are part of a larger, recurring pattern. But the question remains, why? What causes these massive shifts in the climate? Why does the Earth go through these extreme freezes, and why do they always seem to come without warning? As the survivors continue to study the records, they begin to realize that the ice ages may not be as random as they first thought. The ancient texts suggest that there is something, some force, triggering these events. Whether it's a natural phenomenon, something hidden deep within the Earth, or perhaps even something beyond their understanding, the survivors begin to see a pattern emerging. The events of the ice ages, it seems, are not accidents. They may be the result of forces far beyond human control, forces that have been shaping the Earth for eons. The survivors grow increasingly concerned. If this cycle has occurred before, does that mean it will continue? Is the thawing they are experiencing just another temporary reprieve before the ice returns? The uncertainty weighs heavily on them. They realize that no matter how much they rebuild, no matter how advanced their technology becomes, they may never be truly safe from the forces that control the Earth's climate. They are left with the chilling realization that the Earth is in a constant state of flux, and survival depends not just on adapting to the present, but on understanding the patterns of the past. As they continue to study the records, they begin to look for clues that will help them predict the next cycle, hoping to prepare for the worst. But what they discover is not just about the ice. It's about the forces that drive the changes in the Earth itself. The survivors are now faced with the daunting task of not just surviving, but understanding the deeper mysteries of the planet they call home. They know that the cycle of the ice ages may not be over, and they must be ready for whatever comes next. The survivors, having spent years piecing together the mysteries of the past, finally uncover the truth. The Earth is not simply subject to random freezes. Instead, it is caught in a cyclical pattern, a recurring rhythm of ice ages that has been happening for millions of years. The records they found in the ruins point to a chilling reality. The planet has gone through these freezing periods before, and it's not a question of if, but when the next freeze will come. The cause of these ice ages is not just the shifting of the Earth's tilt, but something deeper, something beyond their full understanding. Through their studies, the survivors discover that the ice ages are linked to subtle, gradual changes in the Earth's orbit. These changes, which occur over long periods of time, are enough to alter the way the planet receives sunlight. As the Earth's orbit shifts, the amount of sunlight reaching certain parts of the planet decreases, cooling the atmosphere and leading to the onset of the ice ages. This, they realize, is not a single event. It's part of an ongoing, long-term cycle that stretches across eons. The Earth has been through this before, and it will happen again. But the survivors don't stop there. As they dig deeper into the records, they find hints of something even more mysterious. Unknown cosmic influences that may be contributing to the Earth's climate cycles. It's unclear exactly what these forces are, but the ancient texts suggest that they could be linked to events far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Perhaps it's the alignment of distant stars, or the gravitational pull of unseen bodies in space. Whatever the cause, it becomes clear that the ice ages are not just about Earth's orbit. They are part of a cosmic dance that is beyond human control. The survivors now understand that they are not just living on a planet subject to random weather patterns. They are living in the middle of a vast, cyclical system, one that has been in motion for billions of years and will continue to move forward long after they are gone. The knowledge they have uncovered is both awe-inspiring and terrifying. While they now have a clearer understanding of the forces that shape their world, they also realize that no matter how advanced their technology becomes, they cannot escape the cycles of nature. With this new knowledge, the survivors begin to prepare. They know that another freeze could come at any time, that the Earth's orbit could shift once again, plunging the planet into another ice age. The resources they have fought so hard to rebuild are precious, but they are not enough. They begin to plan for the future, not just in terms of survival, but in terms of long-term adaptation. They start to stockpile food, build more durable shelters, and refine the technologies they've developed over the years. They know that the Earth cycles are inevitable, and the best they can do is prepare for the worst. As they look to the future, the survivors are more determined than ever. They know that the next ice age could be just around the corner, but they also know that the knowledge they have gained will help them survive it. The Earth's cycles may be beyond their control, but their ability to adapt, to plan, and to work together will ensure that humanity will endure no matter how many freezes may come. It happens again. A shift in Earth's orbit, subtle but unmistakable, triggers the beginning of a new ice age. The survivors, who have long feared this day, now face the reality of another freeze. But this time, the world is different. This time, humanity is ready. The years spent studying the ancient records, the knowledge gained from surviving the last ice age, and the technology developed over generations have all prepared them for this moment. The Earth is cooling, the ice is coming back, but the survivors are no longer helpless in the face of it. As the first signs of the new ice age appear, the survivors are not caught off guard. They have learned from the past, and they know that they must act quickly to adapt. The temperature drops steadily, and the familiar chill in the air begins to spread. The skies darken, the sunlight becomes weaker, and the ice sheets, though not yet fully formed, begin to advance. But instead of panic, there is a calm resolve among the survivors. They know what must be done. Using the advanced technology they've developed over the years, the survivors begin to implement their plans. They've built stronger, more insulated shelters that can withstand the extreme cold. They've stockpiled food, medical supplies, and materials that will allow them to survive the harsh conditions. The tools and techniques they've honed over the years are now put to the test. They build underground storage facilities to keep food from freezing. They develop more efficient ways of producing energy, using wind and water power to provide heat and light. The survivors are determined to do more than just survive. They are ready to fight back against the ice. In the cities that have begun to emerge from the ruins of the old world, humanity unites once more. People from different factions, who had once been divided by distrust and fear, now come together to face the common threat. Cooperation, which had once been hard, earned, is now second nature. They share resources, exchange knowledge, and work together to create the infrastructure they'll need to endure the freeze. The survivors know that unity is their greatest strength. They can't afford to be divided. The ice may be relentless, but together they are stronger. As the ice begins to advance, the survivors continue to adapt. They use their advanced technology to track the ice's movement, to predict where it will hit next, and to plan their defenses. They reinforce the shelters, fortify the cities, and continue to innovate in ways they never thought possible. The world they once knew is becoming increasingly uninhabitable, but the survivors are no longer living in fear. They are ready for whatever the ice can throw at them. The return of the ice is not the end of humanity. It is a new beginning. The survivors have learned the hard lessons of the past, and now, with their knowledge, technology, and unity, they are prepared to face the future. The ice will come, but this time, humanity is ready. The cycle may continue, but the survivors will continue to adapt, to survive, and to rebuild. The return of ice is just another chapter in the story of humanity's resilience. The new ice age has arrived, and with it comes the harshest test humanity has ever faced. The ice spreads across the land, and the cold cuts deeper than ever before. The survivors feel the chill, not just in their bones, but in their very spirits. But even in the face of this overwhelming freeze, they refuse to give up. The lessons they learned from the last ice age, the strength they gained from the years of hardship, and the innovations they have developed over time all come together as humanity faces its most brutal challenge. The survivors understand that they cannot survive this freeze the way they did before. They can't simply rely on their old ways of life. They need something more, something that will allow them to thrive, not just endure. So they innovate. They create new technologies that allow them to adapt to the freezing world around them. One of the first breakthroughs is the development of underground cities. As the surface becomes too cold to inhabit, humanity begins to dig deep into the earth, creating vast networks of underground shelters. These cities are not just places to survive, they are places to live, to rebuild, and to create a future that goes beyond mere survival. The underground cities are equipped with sophisticated heating systems that make it possible for people to live in relative comfort, even as the temperatures outside plummet. These heating systems are powered by new technologies that tap into the Earth's natural resources. Geothermal energy, once a distant dream, is now harnessed to provide heat and power to the cities. The survivors no longer have to fear the cold creeping in through the walls. They have created a safe haven from the ice. But it's not just about building shelters. The survivors are determined to continue growing food, even in the face of the ice. They develop advanced agricultural techniques that allow them to grow crops in controlled indoor environments. Hydroponics, aquaponics, and vertical farming systems become the foundation of their new food production methods. The survivors have learned that they cannot depend on the land in the traditional way. They must adapt to the changing world and find new ways to feed themselves. Social organization also changes in response to the new ice age. The survivors know that they must work together more than ever before. The small, isolated communities of the past have given way to larger, more complex societies, where cooperation and resource sharing are key to survival. These new societies are built on the principles of mutual aid and collective responsibility. People come together to ensure that no one is left behind, that everyone has enough food, warmth, and shelter. It's not just about surviving the ice, it's about building a future for generations to come. As the ice continues to advance, humanity's resilience is tested like never before. The cold is relentless, but the survivors are equally relentless in their fight to stay alive. They use every ounce of their ingenuity, every scrap of knowledge they've accumulated, and every bit of strength they have to keep moving forward. The ice may try to take everything from them, but it will not break their spirit. They are determined to face the challenges ahead, to adapt, to survive, and to rebuild, no matter how many freezes the earth may throw their way. The ice continues to advance, and as the cold spreads across the planet, the divisions that once separated humanity seem less important. Nations, once fiercely independent and often at odds with each other, begin to see the truth. The cold does not care about borders, about old rivalries, or about who has the most resources. The ice is coming for everyone. The survivors know that their only chance at enduring this new freeze is to work together, to unite against the common enemy. What was once impossible now becomes their greatest hope: global cooperation. Governments and factions from all corners of the earth come together, putting aside their differences and pooling their resources in the fight for survival. The survivors are no longer thinking in terms of us versus them. There is no time for division. Every group has something to offer, whether it's knowledge, technology, or raw materials. The icy grip of the freeze forces humanity to realize that their survival depends on each other. No single nation, no single faction can survive alone. The world's leaders, who had once been preoccupied with power and control, now face a far greater challenge. They must find ways to work together, to share their knowledge and resources without hoarding, without selfishness. Governments that were once divided by ideology now collaborate on a global scale, setting aside old disputes in favor of a common cause. The wealthier nations contribute their advanced technologies, while those with less wealth but vast natural resources offer what they can to support the fight. One of the first steps in this global unity is the sharing of knowledge. Scientists, engineers, and agricultural experts from every corner of the earth come together to exchange ideas, to develop technologies that will help them survive the cold. New methods of energy production, agriculture, and shelter construction are rapidly shared and refined. The survivors realize that their strength lies not just in their individual abilities, but in the collective power of human ingenuity. The more they collaborate, the stronger they become. Together, humanity builds large-scale heating systems, advances in renewable energy, and food production systems that can sustain entire populations through the freeze. The creation of global underground cities, interconnected by transportation and communication networks, becomes a priority. These cities are not just places of refuge, they are beacons of hope, places where humans can work together to continue life despite the frozen world outside. The earth may be cold, but the warmth of cooperation spreads through the people, keeping the light alive in the darkest of times. But even with this unprecedented unity, the fight for survival is far from easy. The cold continues to tighten its hold, and resources remain scarce. However, for the first time, humanity is not just reacting to the freeze. They are actively preparing, building, and innovating together. The survivors know that the ice is not just a temporary setback. It's part of a cycle that will continue to challenge them. But with each step forward, they grow stronger. Each success in cooperation, each breakthrough in technology, brings them closer to a future where humanity has not only survived the cold, but emerged stronger from it. In the face of the overwhelming ice, humanity unites like never before. They've learned the hard way that the greatest threat to their survival isn't the ice itself, it's the isolation that once divided them. Together, they face the cold, determined not just to survive, but to thrive, no matter how many freezes the Earth might face. After what feels like an eternity of cold, of darkness, and of survival, the ice finally begins to recede once again. It's slow at first, a gradual shift that hardly seems noticeable. But as the seasons change, something incredible happens. The Earth, which has been locked in a frozen grip for thousands of years, starts to thaw. The thick ice that once stretched across entire continents begins to pull back, revealing land that has been hidden beneath its cold surface for generations. The skies, once shrouded in clouds of snow and frost, begin to clear, allowing the sun to shine through once more. The survivors, who had spent so much of their lives underground, in the shelter of cities built deep within the earth, now see the world they had almost forgotten. They step out of their refuges, into a world that is both familiar and alien, a world that is slowly waking up. As the survivors emerge from their underground homes, they are greeted by a new Earth, an Earth that has been shaped by the ice, but is now beginning to reclaim its vitality. The land that had been barren and frozen for so long is now covered in patches of green. The forests, once swallowed by the glaciers, begin to grow again. Rivers that had been locked in ice for centuries begin to flow, their waters rushing over the land, carving new paths. It is a new beginning, a second chance for life to flourish. The survivors, whose ancestors had faced unimaginable hardships in the face of the ice, now look around at the thawing world with a sense of awe and wonder. They had survived the cold, and now they can see that the earth is giving them another opportunity to thrive. For the survivors, the thaw is more than just a change in the seasons. It is a symbol of their endurance, of their ability to overcome the greatest challenges the earth has thrown at them. They look back on the years spent in the darkness, in the cold, in the underground cities that had once been their only hope for survival. They remember the battles fought for food, for warmth, for shelter. They remember the fear that the ice would never end, that the earth would remain frozen forever. But they also remember the unity that brought them together, the innovation that allowed them to adapt, and the resilience that carried them through. Now, as the earth thaws and life begins to return, the survivors stand on the edge of a new world. They know that the challenges they face are far from over. The earth may have thawed, but the scars of the ice age will remain. The world they live in is forever changed, and so are they. But they are no longer the same people who once huddled together in the darkness, afraid of what the next freeze might bring. They are the descendants of those who faced the cold and survived, who adapted to a changing world, and who built something stronger in the face of the most overwhelming odds. As the ice continues to recede and life flourishes once more, the survivors look ahead, knowing that the earth is always in motion, always changing. But they are ready for whatever comes next. They have faced the cold, they have endured, and now they can face the future with hope, knowing that they can survive anything the world throws their way. The final thaw is not just the end of the ice. It is the beginning of something new, something stronger, something that will last for generations to come. The earth has thawed once again. The ice that once ruled the planet, that held everything in its freezing grip, has finally receded. The long, dark years of the ice ages are over. What remains is a world that is at once familiar and new, a world where life is returning, where humanity stands on the edge of a new era. The survivors, who have endured the worst the earth could throw at them, look out at the thawed landscape with a sense of wonder and possibility. They have not only survived the ice, they have evolved, adapted, and learned from the harshest lessons the planet has to offer. This new world is not the same as the one humanity once knew. The landscape has changed, shaped by the years of freezing temperatures, but it is alive again. Forests that had been buried beneath layers of ice now stretch out across the land. Rivers that had been frozen solid flow freely, carving new paths through the earth. The skies are clear, and the warmth of the sun feels like a blessing after so many years of darkness. For the survivors, the thaw is not just the return of spring, it is the dawn of a new chapter in the story of humanity. As the earth comes alive once more, so too does humanity. The survivors, who once lived in fear of the ice returning, now find themselves in a new age of exploration. No longer confined to underground cities or limited by the harshness of the freeze, humanity sets out to rediscover the planet they thought they had lost forever. There is a sense of optimism that fills the air, a sense that the world is full of new opportunities, but this time humanity is different. The lessons of the ice ages have shaped them in ways they never expected. They know that the earth is always changing, always evolving, and that they must be prepared for whatever comes next. The new era is one of scientific discovery and innovation. The survivors, with their hard-earned knowledge of survival, now turn their minds to exploration. They build new technologies that allow them to explore the thawed earth and the mysteries it holds. From the depths of the oceans to the highest mountain peaks, humanity sets out to chart the world once more. Their curiosity is boundless, driven by the desire to understand the planet they call home. They no longer see themselves as victims of the ice, they see themselves as caretakers, explorers, and builders of a new world. But this new world is not just about exploration, it's about cooperation. The unity forged in the fires of the Ice Age remains strong, and the survivors now work together across borders, across nations, to rebuild and grow. The divisions that once separated them seem insignificant now. They have learned the value of collaboration, of working together to face challenges that no one group could overcome alone. This new era is one of global cooperation, where knowledge, resources, and ideas are shared freely to ensure that humanity can thrive no matter what the future holds. The survivors look back at the Ice Ages with a sense of gratitude for the lessons they taught, but they do not dwell in the past. They know that the future is full of uncertainty, and the ice could always return. But they also know that they are stronger now, smarter, and more united than ever before. The lessons learned from the two ice ages have shaped their future, and they are ready for whatever comes next. The earth is thawed, and humanity is ready to begin again. This is not the end, it is a new beginning.